Hello, welcome back. It is time to talk about all of the books I'm going to read for Historathon. So before we get started, we have a little indie girl over here chewing away on her bone, so don't mind that. You'll probably hear a lot of that crunching, but we gotta keep her occupied while we talk about books. All right, so as you may know by now, I am hosting Historathon this month, and it is a month-long readathon that's happening the whole month of November, where we read historical fiction books. So just by reading one historical fiction book, you've participated. We'll link our little graphic that has all the prompts, and that way you can kind of use that to follow along and use that as your little bingo board. But I want to talk about all of the books that I plan on reading, as well as some recommendations for some of the prompts in case you get stuck. First, I want to talk about the group read that, of course, I will be participating in, and that's The Briar Club by Kate Quinn. And I will post on the screen all of the information about that live show, as well as in the description box. So this is the inspiration for the graphic, and I've heard that it's a really good story to discuss. But I'm probably going to read this for historical era exploration. It might also fit into a couple of others. I've told this might count for a sense of place because the boarding house itself is almost like a character in the book. But I've never read a book about the McCarthy era, and I don't really know much about that. So that's probably what I'm going to use it for, but I think it could fit in a couple of different prompts. Other books that you could use for historical era exploration, and I have some other recommendations for historical era exploration. The first is The Medicine Woman of Galveston by Amanda Skenendorf, and this is set in 1900 during the great hurricane that happened in Galveston, Texas. But this could also be used for fiction and nonfiction hybrid, since that hurricane is a real thing that happened. It's one of the nation's worst natural disasters to date, so it would count for multiple. The Orphan Collector by Ellen Marie Wiseman could also count for historical era exploration because this is about the Spanish flu, so if that's a new historical era to you, this one would be perfect. Or this could also be fiction, nonfiction hybrid because the Spanish flu is a real thing that happened. For famous historical figures, I think I'm probably going to read The 19th Wife by David Ebershoff because this is about Brigham Young, and I don't know that he's famous, but this is the only book that I have that has like a real person from history in it. So I might be cheating a little bit, but for historical romance, I am going to be reading The Love Elixir of Augusta Stern by Linda Cohen Loigman. And this was a book of the month in September, and I haven't really heard anybody talking about it, but it seems to be somebody reconnects with an old love from the 1920s. And so I think it's like a new beginnings, maybe fated mates type of story, but it says love elixir, so it's gotta be historical romance, right? You could find so many historical romances, but the one that I'm gonna recommend is Water for Elephants by Sarah Gruen, and this is a love story between two people who are part of a traveling circus. Okay, sorry about that. Somebody came to my door, and so I had to talk to somebody for a second, but I wanted to talk about what I'm going to read for historical mystery. So I am going to read Lost Boy Found by Kirsten Alexander, and I think Krista from Books and Jams recommended this to me, but I'm not sure. But it's set in 1913 at Half Moon Lake, Louisiana, and a child went missing, so that is the mystery. And then somebody shows up claiming to be the missing child, but they're not sure if it actually is. So seems pretty mysterious to me. But this could also count for fiction and nonfiction hybrid because it is based on the true story of a boy named Bobby Dunbar. So we have a lot of things that count for multiple prompts. Some recommendations for historical mysteries. Nobody is Surprised, The Lost Girls of Willowbrook by Ellen Marie Wiseman. This could also work for fiction and nonfiction hybrid because Willowbrook is a real place, or was a real place. It has been shut down, but you can still go and visit and see where it is. But this was in, I believe, Staten Island. Yes, Staten Island, New York. And the mystery is a girl is missing at the Willowbrook State School for children, and so you're trying to figure out that mystery. There's also a serial killer element. You're trying to figure out who the serial killer is. So very genre defying, probably counts for multiple prompts as well. Another great option for historical mystery might be The Frozen River by Ariel Lahan. It's one of my favorite books that I've read this year. And this is set in 1789 in Maine, and it's about Martha Ballard. And once again, fiction, nonfiction hybrid. And Martha Ballard was a nurse, and this is a work of fiction based on her letters and her diary entries. And she is trying to figure out who the dead body in the lake belonged to, and also solving the mystery of who is assaulting women in this town. For the social/cultural prompt, I am going to read The House of Eve by Sadiqa Johnson. And this is set in Philadelphia in 1948. and then also in Washington, D.C. It says, in the dawn of the 1950s, Ruby and Eleanor are complete strangers until their paths unexpectedly collide. Forced to make the most heartbreaking decisions of their lives, will their choices save them or be their undoing? And it's blurbed by Kate Quinn and Kristen Harmel, and so I'm hoping this will be a good one. It was a Reese's Book Club pick, which can be hit or miss for me, but I have read another Sadiqa Johnson book and really enjoyed it, so I'm excited about this one, and I'm hoping that it's not as dark as the other one I read. Speaking of which, that would be my recommendation for a book that I've already read, would be The Yellow Wife by Sadiqa Johnson. And this is about a woman who leaves from being enslaved in Virginia on a plantation, and she ends up as the wife of a jailer in Richmond. This is very heavy, a lot of heavy topics, but I think it's a really important book, but definitely know that you need to go in and be aware of all of the trigger warnings. For book to movie adaptation, I don't really know what I'm going to be reading yet for that one, but I do know that I want to recommend to you The Help by Catherine Stockett, and the movie and the book are both so good. This is set in the 1960s in Jackson, Mississippi. For a strong sense of place, I think that some of the books I've already talked about will count for that prompt, but the one I specifically wanted to recommend is The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna, and this is about a family in the 1970s, and they moved to Alaska, and Alaska is essentially another character in this book, and so I think it definitely has a very strong sense of place, and a lot of the descriptions of the Alaskan frontier are just spot on. I have quite a few other books that I could potentially read for Historathon that I'm sure would count for one or multiple prompts. I have multiple books by Susan Meisner that I need to get to. I have a book by Christina Baker Klein called The Orphan Train that I need to get to, and I've seen this. I have to go back and watch some of the videos again. I've watched multiple videos of people like recommending things for different prompts, and I do remember seeing this and I was like, oh, I have that, but I don't remember what prompt it was recommended for, and I don't remember the creator, so I'll figure it out and link it in the description box. I have The Last Carolina Girl by Megan Church, and this is set in the 1930s. We have The Orphan House, set in 1930s as well. The Edge of Lost by Christina McMorris. And this one is set in Alcatraz, so I'm thinking this might count for like historical mystery maybe. And then I have two historical fiction books about the circus or a traveling circus or something related to like a freak show. So maybe that will be a themed reading vlog, who knows? Okay, those are essentially all of the historical fiction books that I have on my shelf that are unread, and then a bunch of others that I feel like would be great to fit into some of these prompts. And thank you so much for watching. I'm sure this was probably a long video, but I wish everybody a great Historathon, and I'm sure I'll be seeing you in my next video. Bye.